The second brawler coming in the update is Glowbert. He is the first member of a new trio set in the Star Park Aquarium. He's a little guy in an anglerfish costume, and he sounds pretty nerdy, which just makes me like him more.
Jellyfish have no brains! Relatable?
Glowbert is a mythic support brawler, and he has 2 entirely new mechanics to Brawl Stars. So before we make him fight 1v1 versus every brawler in the game, let me tell you about his abilities. At max level, he has 6,800 hit points, which isn't a ton, but it's not horrible. His shot is a long-range shot, about the same as Griff. This can either be a heal or an attack depending on who you shoot. If you shoot a teammate, it will heal them for 180 health per tick. If you attack an enemy with it, it will deal an initial 500 damage and then 200 damage per tick after that. Now the damage or healing ticks 5 times per second, so it really does add up. The beam that is attached, also known as a tether, will not break until you either move out of range or are blocked by a wall. Even then, it flickers a bit, giving you a chance to get back in range or around that wall, and you don't even have to shoot again for it to stay attached. You can continue to attack this target, and if you hit them, it will apply that initial damage again, but if you fire at the same enemy and miss, it will still not break the original tether. However, you can fire at a new enemy to switch. You can only have 1 damage tether active, but you can heal a teammate and damage an enemy at the same time. Both of his star powers modify this tether in some way. His first star power, called Biotic Ecosystem, works when you are tethered to a teammate and an enemy at the same time. When you are, it will reduce the enemy's damage by 20%, as well as boost your teammate's damage by the same amount. However, the star power I think is even better is his second one, called Parasitism, which is a strange word. With this star power, whenever you're tethered to an enemy, you will be healed for half of the damage that you deal. And while 100 hit points a tick or 500 hit points a second doesn't sound like much, it keeps you in the action and will be the deciding factor in many fights. It also pairs very well with his second gadget called More Lumens. When pressed, it will double the damage and the healing of any active tethers Glowbert has going. So combine that with his second star power, and you'll be dealing 2,000 damage per second and healing yourself for 1,000 per second, and it lasts for 2.5 seconds. It's very good, but his other gadget is also really good. It's called Slippery Savior. With this, when pressed, it will dash a short distance and then heal 2,500 in a circle around him. The cooldown is longer at 17 seconds, but it's still very solid. Now, his other new mechanic in the game is his super called Creep from the Deep. With this, Glowbert reveals his face to his enemies with a wide cone shot. It will fear enemies, causing them to not only lose control over their brawler for 2 seconds, but also run away from Glowbert. This is a very strong super that not only can be defensive when he needs it, which he will, but also be paired with his second gadget to deal a bunch of damage while the enemy can't even retaliate. Okay, now that you know all about Glowbert, let's see how he fares in base level interactions against every brawler in the game, starting with the biggest and baddest brawlers, the tanks. Let's just get the ugly part out of the way real quick and let the tanks run him over. Support brawlers normally do very badly here, and Glowbert probably has the lowest burst damage in the game. And as such, there's pretty much zero chance that he's going to walk away with 1 in the win column here. Frank hammers him into the ground, although it takes 4 shots thanks to Glowbert's healing. BB swings, and she doesn't miss. And Ash takes out the trash with ease. Hank, however, despite being able to 2-shot him, takes actually a 3rd bubble to finally bring him down because Glowbert's heals are non-stop. Trunk doesn't have that problem and wins in 3 spins. And Buster beats him as well with 3 blasts from the projector. Ollie's up next, looking to keep the win streak alive, but actually, no, his damage isn't strong enough, and Glowbert heals himself and ends up with his first win. Meg, however, does not have that problem, and although it takes a lot of shots, she comes out on top. And then finally, we have Draco. Yeah, that one wasn't close. So 1 win and 13 losses. I bet if you guessed beforehand, you would have guessed 0 wins. And honestly, I was surprised too. Here's the thing. In a game, if a tank comes at you and you're playing Glowbert, you probably should have your super ready. But with almost every one of these tanks, you can just outrange them. You can latch onto them and they cannot even hit you. So if you play your range right, you can easily win. Although a normal player will probably just go behind a wall and not let you do that. Or if they have a gap closer, they're just going to pounce on you and destroy you. His fear is going to come in clutch for these moments. And while yes, if you surprise him, he will be a very easy kill. But if he's ready for you, he might just be the most annoying brawler that you will ever face. So let's see how he stacks up alongside his fellow support brawlers. In our first pillow fight, we have Poco versus Glowbert, and it takes a while, but in the end, the constant heals from the fish prevail. Gus isn't able to take him out in 3 shots, and he was real close to healing enough to absorb another one. Egg Pam, however, cannot be cracked, and she rolls over him for the win. Barry comes awfully close to getting it, but that star power for Glowbert comes in clutch. Max just doesn't give him a chance to heal with those constant shots, but Ruffs, he has to take a 4th shot to win this fight in a close one. It also takes Gray 4 shots, but he does indeed take home the win. And Doug just slaps him with his... No, I'm not saying that one. Next, Jae Young also has a really hard time getting enough damage in there, and the war of attrition is won by Glowbert. Kit reloads really fast and wins pretty darn easily. And then we have Byron. The poor guy can't even win against a nerdy dude in a fish suit. So 4 wins and 7 losses, but almost all of them were very close. What I really like about Glowbert here is that his healing is non-stop. As long as you have his star power, you can do it without relying on any extra ammo at all. And no other brawler in the game that is mobile can do that. Sure, outside of his gadgets, there's no burst damage or burst healing, but it is a never-ending supply of heals or damage coming your way. So despite posting a losing record on this one, he has some serious advantages here. Of course, other brawlers like Gray and Byron are just going to outrange you, and Kit can ambush you, but if you play him like he's meant to be played, the other team is going to absolutely hate you. And that's a good thing, unless the other team sends an assassin your way. So now we've reached the part of the video where I show you the new brawler's biggest counter. And it's really not even close here. Glowbert does not have any burst damage, and the assassins, they have that in spades. These brawlers could easily beat almost every other support brawler, but Glowbert, he's even an easier kill. With almost no damage to ward off the surprise attacks from these assassins, he's left to take the brunt of the damage. It even takes Mortis a painful 5 swipes to finally put Glowbert 6 feet under. When Miko jumps, it disconnects his tether and he easily wins. Melody sings him a tune in the key of L, and Lily shanks him 3 times with her dagger. Ali beats him without any trouble, and Gigi has no issues winning. Crow reduces his healing by a lot and wins easily, while Leon just evaporates him. Cordelius puts out a ton of damage, and Kenji can also heal himself, but deals a lot more damage and wins. And finally, Kaze with 3 quick attacks finishes off the perfect run for the assassins. So 0-17. Not a shock. We were kind of expecting this one with the pairing of these 2 brawlers. Now in a game, it'll actually probably go exactly like this, unless Glowbert has his super ready. If he does, that will stop any brawler in their tracks and send them the other direction. This will be the lifesaver that Glowbert needs. Without it, he is in a ton of trouble. Now he might be able to use his other gadget and dash to get out of that trouble and heal himself, but more than likely, you're just going to have to really rely on your teammates to keep you safe here if you don't have your super ready. So save it up and stay close to your friends, because if not, and an assassin gets the drop on you, then it's lights out. Jesse starts off the controller strong, but Glowbert almost heals enough to make it through that last shot. Penny's damage, though, is just a little bit less than Jesse's, and she isn't able to secure the win. Although Bo has no problem. And when it comes to big damage, both Ems and Griff have no issues getting the dub. Gale's able to get a win too, but it takes 4 shots. Meeple does a lot of damage, and Glowbert just can't take it. Gene, however, uses all of his shots, and then another, but that self-healing is just too much to overcome. Mr. P bounces some suitcases off of his head, and Squeak has just enough in the tank to get the win. South Park Lou absolutely dominates Glowbert, and it only takes Otis 2 shots to bring him down. Willow's damage takes a while to ramp up, and the fight goes down to the wire, but Glowbert comes out on top. Chuck, however, is having none of it, and he wins quickly. And in the battle of constant damage, they trade blows, but Charlie gets the win over the new brawler. Finks doesn't even need to aim his shots off to the side, as just the main attack brings Glowbert down to nothing. Ziggy sends a ton of lightning onto Glowbert, but he keeps up the steady heals and damage to beat him. Sandy doesn't deal much damage, and Glowbert keeps barely healing enough to survive, and in the end, he manages to win. Amber, however, holds one button down until Glowbert is no more. So 5 wins and 14 losses. That sounds rough, but again, these fights were pretty darn close. Glowbert's able to keep the steady stream of healing, and in a game, it's doubtful that the enemy is going to hit every single shot, while as Glowbert, you just have to hit one of them to start that train of non-stop damage. That being said, a lot of these controllers are going to outrange him, and the ones that have turrets like Jesse, Glowbert is going to struggle getting rid of them. Mr. P will be a nightmare for Glowbert, having to constantly keep tethering to the new porters while Mr. P outranges him as well. This one could go either way for these two, but Glowbert, he's rarely coming on his own. He's gonna have a teammate with him, and when he's healing himself, a teammate and damaging you, yeah, that's a tough fight, but not as tough of a fight as it's going to be against the damage dealer, so let's see how he deals with that. This is another one of those matchups where, as a support brawler, you're really not expected to be taking on the damage dealers toe-to-toe. If you find yourself in that situation in a game, something has probably gone very wrong. But in the name of science, here we are pitting the overall strongest cast of brawlers in the game against one of the least bursty support brawlers that Brawl has ever seen. It's no big surprise here that the damage dealers are walking all over Glowbert, and really, you should expect to see that. Colette, however, is not going to be able to take out pretty much any brawler getting non-stop heals without using her super. On the flip side, Lola doesn't have that problem. Pearl disintegrates him, and Tara just shreds him. Eve does take her time, but in the end gets a win. RT's extra damage builds up and is just too much for him to handle. Clancy at stage 2 only takes 3 shots, while Mo has to send a 4th batch of rocks his way to get the win. Lumi can also deal constant damage, but a lot more of it. And Mina finishes him off with that windmill kick. Spike has to wait for a 4th shot to reload and comes awfully close to losing. And 3 shots from Surge doesn't cut it, so he sends 1 more to send Glowbert packing. Chester, however, yeah, 1 win and 18 losses, and that 1 win was because of Colette's mechanics. This is just flat out a mismatch. Pretty much every damage dealer will have at least equal or greater range than Glowbert and deal significantly more damage. But again, like I mentioned, this is not a matchup that should be happening. If it does, I'd suggest you use that fear and gain some space, or turn and run back to your teammates to get some help. You shouldn't even really be in the same lane as a damage dealer. It's not a great idea. You're going to get overpowered. Glowbert is a support brawler in the truest sense, and he should be played that way. You'll want to stay at range, get help from your team, or just find safety behind a wall to keep these guys away from you. Another class of brawlers that like to stay behind walls are the artillery brawlers, so let's see how they do. The throwers normally have low health, but to balance that out, they can usually pump out quite a bit of damage. Glowbert also has mediocre health, but he can't deal the damage like these other brawlers can. Even Tick is able to walk away with his first win in years. Larry and Lori are able to overpower Glowbert for a win as well. Sprout made it a close match, but one last plant bomb sealed the deal. But Juju just barely missed killing him on her 3rd shot and then ended up getting beat. So he went 2-5 against these brawlers, and they didn't even have to use a wall. And in the game, it's even worse. Glowbert really has zero way of getting to these brawlers. A thrower can just sit behind a wall and lob damage his way without a care in the world, and there is literally nothing that he can do about it. His fear doesn't go through walls, and while he might be able to use a gadget to try to get to them, even if he latches on, they can just break line of sight with a wall again, and that tether is gone. The throwers have the upper hand in this matchup easily. So then we just have one class left, and it's the Marksman. When it comes to comparing Glowbert to this class of brawlers, the difference in damage is quite apparent. That being said, if Glowbert can latch on and survive 3 shots from these brawlers, he does stand a chance. That is if he can survive shot number 4. which usually he can't. These marksmen deal way too much point damage for Glowbert to survive for too long. But if you get a brawler like Belle, whose shots don't deal as much damage, the heals may just be enough to win. Mandy deals the perfect amount to win in 3 shots, and Maisie deals even more to snuff him out. But Angelo has to slowly build that shot, and by the time it's charged up, that healing is rolled in and he loses ever so slightly. It does take Janet 4 shots, but 4 is more than enough. And then there is the other new brawler, Pierce, who is forced to pick up his shells, but when he does, it's all over. So 2-9 against the Marksman, and an overall record of 15-83. That sounds pretty horrible, right? Well, not so fast. Back when I did this test with Byron, he went 0-42. He did not beat a single brawler, but is Byron bad? I'd argue that he's been a staple in the meta for years, so in comparison, Glowbert actually did really well. So then does that mean that Glowbert's going to be like a top tier brawler? I don't know if I'd go that far. Glowbert has some serious downside. No burst damage, no real burst healing either outside of a gadget, as well as his range is nothing to write home about. That being said, he has some real upside too. His super is very good, and he gets it pretty easy since he can build it up from healing his teammates as well. Both of his gadgets are great, but I vastly prefer his second star power over his first one, unless you're just going for a very passive support role. There are, however, some game modes that I think he's just going to be horrible at, like Solo Showdown, for example. Don't play him there unless you just love torturing yourself. However, he might do okay on duos and trios. Brawl Ball might get a bit tough because he's got no great defense outside of his super, but modes where support brawlers normally shine, I actually think that he might be one of the most annoyingly good brawlers that we've seen in a while. Emphasis on annoying. He has good healing that's constant, and that damage really sneaks up on you. Bounty, it's going to be rough unless you're just a god at dodging, as you're going to get outranged by most of the brawlers there, but he might be able to provide some nice support. I can see him working well in Hot Zone with the right team comp, but overall, I think that he might be relegated to more of a niche pick. With the right team comp, I think that he could really work well, but he also is going to get ran over in many other situations. This one is hard to predict. I think that he's going to be much better than many people are going to think, but how good will he end up being? I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10, but with the possibility that he is way better than I think. Or way worse. It's really hard to tell on this one. How good do you think he's going to be? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate you very much.